afternoon. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Access Show, where we focus on usability, accessibility, and after all, when usability is done well, when accessibility is done well, gee, we get some really good communication. Particularly, we're looking at the digital content area, but we talk communication everywhere. In the last month, we've been really focusing on communication and bringing it to the point today where we're looking at leadership. Our guest for today is a leader in the business network, and I'm really pleased that Shevonne Joyce from Electro is here. Thanks, Shevonne. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to
Oh,
be
it's
part of this
it's
great
actually
series.
it's a privilege to have you on. Shevonne, can you tell me a bit about yourself?
Yes. So my name is Shevonne Joyce. I am the founder and principal consultant at Electro Consulting. I am also autistic with ADHD, and I have a neurological disorder that I acquired. Well, they actually suspect I have two, one in my spine and one in my brain. But for the simplicity, we'll say a neurological disorder that I acquired almost 3 years ago now. And I was completely paralyzed at the time. So I've spent the past 3 years learning to walk again and use my body again. And I still have some cognitive and physical impairments, and I get relapses where I have recurrent paralysis. So prior to getting the neurological disorder, I was a very, what you would term as a high achieving, as people would generally term it, person who was on through full throttle all the time, everywhere doing everything, kind of a wild horse spirit. And after the neurological disorder, I have had to learn how to navigate my brain and my body in a new way. Um, and it has been quite a profound experience, but it has also honestly been character building. And at the risk of, I don't want to sound kind of toxic positivity,
Mm.
but it's the honest truth where I feel that ultimately what happened to me has been a gift.
Yes.
Um, and I'm truly grateful and appreciative to have this new perspective on life.
Siobhan, you say you're autistic, you've got ADHD, you've got the neurological disorders.
Mhm.
How many barriers in communication have you experienced? And it must have been huge.
Yes. So I think if we start with the neurodivergence,
Mm.
being autistic, and bearing in mind we there's individual profiles. So while I can talk about my personal challenges with communication, what I'm experiencing might not be what another
Mm.
autistic person is experiencing. So it's important to point that out. But for me personally, I'm autistic. I can't read the grey and I don't operate in the grey. So I say what I mean and I mean what I say. And I have been trying really hard to learn neurotypical since I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed as an adult as being autistic. Um, and it's honestly been like trying to learn a different language. I'm learning French at the moment as well. I find trying to learn neurotypical like trying to learn French, to be honest.
Yeah.
One of my biggest learnings since realizing, or, I kind of look, I always felt like an alien that had been sent from outer
Yeah.
space on a mission I hadn't figured out yet.
Mhm.
But when I did get my diagnosis and was confirmed, yes, you're autistic, etc., um, one of the first things that I learned about neurotypical conversation was that when they say yes, they don't always mean yes. And that blew my mind. And then I went through like a horror story of how many times in my life has someone said yes to me but not really meant yes? And then I've been confused, or I went through interactions in my life where something happened and there was a disagreement with someone that seemed to come from nowhere, and I didn't really understand what happened. And that was the moment that I realized that I wasn't, that there were barriers to communication. The biggest one for me is not, I need verbal, like direct verbal feedback. So when I meet new people, I will talk to them about the fact that, I'm autistic, um, and to help me, to help you to be able to communicate together, here's what would be really helpful. So say what you mean what you say. If you feel like I'm not getting something, it's not because I don't care, it's because I'm not clocking it. So make sure that you are direct and you give me direct verbal feedback, um, because otherwise I might not understand.
Yeah.
So I I kind of felt like I had been going through my entire life, um, half missing what was actually going on, or what was said, or what wasn't said,
Yeah.
and all of those kinds of things. I would probably say that that is the biggest barrier with my communication.
Mm.
Um, and I sort of see communication as a two-way street. For me
Mhm.
personally, I really would like people to listen and to try their best. It's progress, not perfection,
Yeah.
to communicate in a way that helps me understand. But by the same token, I'm also learning, I'm trying to learn neurotypical ways of communication and different ways that different people prefer to communicate too. So, um, so we've got this collaborative approach to communication. And in amongst all of that best intentions and trying, it's also just understanding that you're not going to get it right all the time. And if I don't get it right, being open to that learning and making sure I correct it or fix it as quickly as possible. So yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest struggle that I have had in my life and that I continue to have with communication.
One of the things when I first met you that really impressed me was you're being a leader. You're standing up. You're not letting your disabilities stop you from getting in there and doing what you want to do. What, in your mind, is a true leader?
Yeah, so a lot of people think of leaders as, CEOs or celebrities or people who are leading a crowd. And that is one type of leader, but I actually think a true leader is, um, or true leadership is the way that you conduct yourself even when nobody's watching. To me, leadership is um, understanding who you are, understanding your purpose
Mhm.
and your legacy and what it is that you were destined to do, really. And then being more focused on your art or your purpose and being of service to that, than the outcome of it. And some of the most iconic brands that have ever walked the earth, and I shared a LinkedIn post the other day about this very topic, mentioning Freddie Mercury. He
Yes.
was someone who was so dedicated to his music. He continued making music up until the day he passed away. And ultimately, he was so dedicated to that mission of making amazing music and changing the world with his music. Yes, not everyone wants to be famous and Freddie Mercury and all the rest of it, but it's really about leaving your mark on the world and walking away from that, being able to be really proud of um, what it is that you did contribute to the world. If you're leading people, I think true leadership is understanding that you are being of service to whoever it is that you're leading, to help them come together and be their best, whether that is staff, clients, industry, whether you're leading thinking in something. It's all it's all about being of service to your purpose and the greater good. And I think some people mistake leadership for thinking that it's all about them when leadership is really not about you at all. It's about being of service.
Mm.
And I
Uh,
think even if we look at like Diana, Princess of Wales,
yeah.
she was of service to her mission and
Mm.
those that she led, and her legacy and her memory have stood the test of time.
Mm.
That to me is true leadership. I once had a mentor say to me, "Would you, if no one recognized what you were doing until after you passed away, would you still be as dedicated to it?" And my honest answer is yes, I would still be as dedicated to what I'm doing right now. Even if nobody recognized me for it, I would still be 100% heart and soul focused on it
Mm.
because I've realized that this is my purpose, this is my passion, and I have the skills to do this. And my legacy really is, I want everyone to know that no matter what happens, I tried my best. I tried my best for the greater good, and to contribute something positive to the world.
That's awesome. In the disability sector,
Mm-hmm.
in our disability community, and we are a large disability community,
Mm-hmm.
how can people with disability lead to improve communication? What can be done? Because you experience barriers, I experience barriers, and it's on sometimes it can be every hour. People just don't realize the challenges that we face all the time. What can people with disability do? Speaking as a leader in the disability community.
Yeah, so I feel like there's two sides to this coin.
Mm.
I feel that the world at large really needs to be focused on ensuring that spaces are accessible and safe for disabled people, 100%.
Mhm.
Um, but leading and advocating for yourself as a disabled person, I have really approached this from a place of compassion in every interaction that I have. Um, so the first thing is, for me, it's been about understanding that disability is a very individual journey and it doesn't look the same way for everyone, and being open with that. So, recently I just produced a free quarterly e-magazine with my business Electro called the Spark Hub. I have never produced a magazine before, let alone produced an accessible magazine.
Mm.
And I put all of my knowledge and skills into that and took feedback from my team who are neurodivergent and disabled, and also from people who had been featured in the magazine as well. I shared it with them. And I created a plain text version as well. But when I sent it out, I said to everybody, I've never created a magazine before, but also I have never created an accessible magazine before. So if anybody has feedback or suggestions about the way that this could be improved, or you need any help with it, please let me know. And it's being open to that learning. So
Mm.
if somebody comes back to you and says, look, 3 columns is really overwhelming for me, can we simplify it to 2 columns? Not taking that as a criticism, but
Mm.
understanding that disability and accessibility is a journey, and focusing on progress and not perfection. So being a leader in a disability space is being open to that learning and continually asking for it. The other part of it is along the lines of asking. Um, I appreciate that people don't know what they don't know. And there's a lot of stereotypes and myths out there about what disability looks like. And so um, if if there's something that I need, I will ask for it. If somebody says something with the best of intentions that maybe doesn't land the right way, um, I will chat to them about that from a place of compassion. So, an example of that is a leader that used the term the blind leading the blind in passing conversation. Now, me personally, I'm not offended if somebody says, I felt paralyzed,
Mm.
because I feel like feeling paralyzed is a legitimate physical and emotional state. However, just because I don't find that offensive, it doesn't mean that somebody else might not find what's being said to be offensive. And so I had a phone call with this person,
Mm.
and I explained to them that, a term like, the blind leading the blind could be very hurtful and upsetting for people who are blind, and that
Mm.
language evolves over time. And I totally understand that, we've all been using certain sayings or certain things without really understanding the true impact of them. But and that I'm navigating this as well myself. But I wanted to bring this up with them because I felt like it's an important piece of information for them to know,
Mm.
and for them to be aware that to do their best to think carefully about what they're saying and what they're actually saying, because when you talk to them about what they're actually saying, it's not what is conveyed. And I think, there's lots of assumptions about what blind people can and can't do, and that's the problem. That's the problem with the which obviously you would know a lot about. um so approaching that conversation from a place of compassion, that leader really appreciated it, and it was meaningful. And I could tell that they were absolutely sincere, and they were learning just as much as we're all learning as well. And I have no doubt that they have gone on to think about the language that they're using, um, and think about different ways that they could express what they're trying to say from that interaction. And I
Mm.
really think that that's true leadership as well. So it's asking for learning, and it's also asking for what you need, and it's offering learning in a really compassionate way. And I guess that situation is different to if someone's being blatantly discriminatory and intentionally discriminatory.
Mm.
And I think that we need to separate these two things out. So, an example
Mm.
of that is, before I started Electro, I've been in business for quite a long time, for like 10 years. And then after the neurological disorder, I was in a part-time job with a past client, which I really loved and valued while I was recovering. They went through some financial challenges, and I was made redundant. So as a disabled neurodivergent woman, I was like, who was going to hire me? Which is a question that I shouldn't have to ask
Mm.
myself. But needless to say, the recruitment process was soul destroying. And I had leaders saying to me, you look really great for this role, but we need somebody in the office 5 days a week.
Mm.
Now, I know with the type of work that I do that somebody doesn't need to be in the office 5 days a week to do this.
Yes.
And in that situation, I wrote back and said, can you explain to me exactly why this job needs to be in the office 5 days a week? So I approached that differently to the way that I approached this other leader, because to me, I feel like everybody knows that certain types of jobs don't. It's blatant, like it's blatant discrimination that
Yes.
you wouldn't hire me because I need to be in the office 5 days a week. Um, and that's how I actually had lots went out into LinkedIn and told everybody about what happened. And I had lots of people approach me and ask me if I would do consulting for them.
Mm.
And that's how electro started. I kind of
Yeah.
started it by accident, but it's been a complete blessing. But I guess, it is important to separate those things out. Sometimes you do need to be very straightforward with people and call them out on their biases and their discriminatory behavior. Other times, yes, I find compassion is a great way to go about it.
And I think you're spot on. My opinion or my thoughts is that, people with disability really do need to break their own belief system where their expectation is the information is not going to be accessible, to ask the question, well, we know we've got the tools to use it. Regardless of what the disability is, there are tools to help in most areas. There are some things you just can't get around. They're not going to be accessible. But in this digital era, that we should be asking the question, can you please provide that information in an accessible way? And this
Yes.
is the way I mean accessible. Explain. Don't just say in an accessible way. Explain to the business person, look, don't ring me. Please send it to me in an email. Have it black and white, dot points. So the information's there.
Mm-hmm.
If there is any extra information, include it that you think is necessary, then I can go through it. I can come back and I can ask you some questions and we can have a conversation. And that, I mean, there's some wonderful, vibrant, incredibly smart, intelligent people in
Mm-hmm.
our world that
Mm-hmm.
have a disability. And the disability hasn't stopped them from becoming doctors of philosophy or whatever it is. They're
Mm-hmm.
out there, they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And all it takes, and probably all it took, was for them to ask and say, no, not good enough. We need to be asking the question, and you need to provide the answer. And I think that's also a form of education if you
Mm-hmm.
do it in the right way. Not
Mm-hmm.
being aggressive or assertive, just saying,
Mm-hmm.
look, please provide it in a form that's accessible. By that, I mean email, dot points, I can take it away, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find most businesses go, oh, yeah, of course.
Mm.
And we didn't know. So
Yeah,
it really is up
absolutely.
to the business.
Yes, and I also think generally, I mean, something that I do with electro is I have in my email footer, if you have any accessibility preferences or requirements, or anything else that
Yep.
we can do to help you access our services, read our advice, whatever it might be,
Mm.
please let us know. When I'm booking meetings with clients or people, whoever I'm booking a meeting with, I will ask them if they have any accessibility preferences or requirements that so we can make sure that they're looked after. It's 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 about everyone making accessibility just the forefront. And it there's lots of, I learned this from Rosie Putland recently. I don't know if you've met or heard of Rosie Putland. She was I interviewed her for this first edition of the Spark Hub. She is about designing accessible tech. She said this isn't just about disabled people. This is about everybody. Everybody benefits from accessibility. And she shared some examples like lifts, text messages,
Mm. Yeah.
Siri,
Mm.
and so it's understanding that everybody benefits from accessibility, and not being afraid of either finding tools that work for yourself. So, for example, for me, when I'm reading something, I get overwhelmed by 50-page documents.
Hmm.
So when I'm reading something, I have to convert it to Word, and then I will listen to it while I'm reading it. And the listening and the seeing at the same time is the combination for me that really helps my brain to get it. But like on a similar vein, if I have a client that sends me huge walls of text emails, I will go back to them and say, can we catch up about this and have a chat about this? And then when we get on the call, I'll say things to them like, could you talk me through? I know you've sent your email, but could you talk me through your thoughts? And they're more than happy to do that. And then they start to learn and to understand that sending Shevonne wall of text emails isn't the most accessible form of communication. Instead, when we get on our meetings, I'm going to talk through my thoughts there. So yeah, it's kind of being prepared to go on a journey with people. But definitely there's a role that everyone can play. And just sharing, just being willing to not, like, I believe 99% of people get out of bed every day wanting to do good.
Yes.
So if we all think about accessibility, if we make it the forefront of what we're doing, because it shows people, even having something on my email footer, it shows people that that I care about accessibility, that I'm thinking about it. And if somebody gave me feedback on that footer, I would thank them and I would modify it. I would update it.
Mm.
I would, so if everyone um, can actively and proactively go about sharing, asking and sharing to help with accessibility and communication, I think that, the world it would be wonderful for so many of us, for
Mm.
sure. Yeah.
Shevonne, I always ask at this stage for a couple of takeaways. What can you give to everyone that's listening as a takeaway about what we've been discussing?
I think the main takeaway um, is really the progress, not perfection.
Mm.
Um, Being open to the learning and not feeling like we have to get it right all the time. Uh, I think it's important to always go into everything with the best of intentions. Um, but it's okay for this to be a journey. You can be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. And so can accessibility and so can communication. Communication isn't perfect. Um, Even those who, even people who are neurotypical and aren't disabled, they come across challenges with communication as well. So I think where a lot of communication challenges come from is the fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of doing the wrong thing. And sometimes that can cause people to, or not knowing how to ask for what people need, or not knowing how to ask for what you need. This fear can sometimes lead to no communication.
Yes.
So, having communication about how we're going to have the communication, communication about communication. Let's make that a hashtag. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's not being afraid. And sometimes I always say to people, because people will say, well, I just don't know how to ask for this, or I don't know how to have this conversation. And sometimes just being honest about that, just saying to someone, look, I'm not sure the best way to communicate this to you, and I'm feeling really worried about ABC. So, is it okay if we go into this conversation and I can just get my thoughts out, or I can just ask for what it is that I need or I'm thinking about, and we can navigate this together? And the other person's going to be like, yeah, of course. And then,
Mm.
make it a collaborative thing. Don't feel like you have to get it perfect the first time. And understanding that if you do make a mistake or someone else makes a mistake, absolutely your feelings are valid in that moment. But there can be a lot of healing and connection through learning together and evolving. And I really think that's personal leadership, like, and leadership in general. So don't be afraid to have the conversation or to ask for what you want or to receive feedback from somebody else. It's a gift.
Thanks, Shevonne. Again, look, thanks so much for your time today. You've made so many great points. How can people contact you if they want to keep the conversation going?
Yes, so I would love for people to contact me. They can find me on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
It's Shevonne Joyce, which is Shevonne, and then Joyce is Joyce. Or they could go to Electro's website, which
Mhm.
is www.electro with an O consulting.au. You can find us there, and I would love to connect. And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and
Oh,
an honor.
thanks. Oh, thanks, Shevonne. So, yeah, this is wonderful, Shevonne Joyce. Thanks again, Shevonne. As I said, so many great points today. So, if you like what we're doing, please like, review, share, give us feedback, good, bad, ugly. I absolutely do love feedback because it gives me a chance to learn and improve what we're doing. And we'll see you next week on the Digital Access Show. See you next time.